Yes, the National Space Biomedical Research Institute was created about, let's see, I think it was about 12 years ago by NASA, and it was looking for a way to kind of fund or funnel research dollars through this institute to go out and collaborate with universities and other research institutes in a way that NASA would have more difficulty doing because NASA is a government agency. And so it was created and run by the Baylor College of Medicine, and I was hired on, oh, probably about, let's see, I guess it's been about 3 years. And I'm the chairman of the user committee, or user panel. And what we're a panel composed of current and former astronauts, as well as current and former flight surgeons. And what we do is we advise the chairman, we're an advisory panel, we advise the chairman on the research projects that we think are operationally relevant. That is, what do we need to learn about, and what do we need to develop a protocol for to deal with a medical problem in space. So as an example, one of the biggest concerns about going out beyond low Earth orbit is the radiation. You know, we find that exercise seems to counteract a lot of the negative effects of spaceflight, like bone loss and muscle atrophy and cardiovascular systems, issues. But really, the radiation is something you worry about. If you start going on a trip to Mars, you're going to be away from the Van Allen belts. You're going to be susceptible to solar flares, and what do you do? And so that's one of our big areas of concerns. And so we see us advising the director for the NSBRI that, well, we should fund more research on developing better detectors or pharmaceutical countermeasures maybe to help protect astronauts from radiation, or even looking at shielding. What kind of lightweight shielding would be most effective to create a safe haven in a spacecraft going to Mars. Other areas of research, as I mentioned, were bone loss and muscle loss and cardiovascular atrophy. Those are always significant areas that we're worried about. Exercise, as I said, seems to counteract a lot of that. But right now, we exercise 2 hours a day on the station, which is a huge hit out of your day. I mean, it's great for staying in shape, but, it cuts into the productivity of the crew. And if you look at how expensive it is to get a crew into space, if we can keep them healthy and have them exercise, but, spend less time doing it, we can get more done. Well, it's very important. First of all, if you think about it, especially on a long flight like a 6-month space flight and on the ISS, if you didn't exercise and use the analogy on Earth, it'd be like laying in bed. So just imagine laying in bed for several months, and then even just trying to get up and walk, you probably wouldn't be able to. But if you got up and you exercised 2 hours a day, you'd probably be okay, and that's the same in space. The exercises we do cardiovascular and resistance exercises, and so we have a treadmill, but of course we have harnesses and rubber bungees to hold us down to the track so that we don't float away. We have exercise bicycles, and we also have a resistive exercise device that uses loaded cords that we can vary the resistance on, and you can attach a bar or a harness to these cords and do weightlifting type exercises. So that helps keep your bones and your muscles in shape. Well, one of the ultrasound experiments that we did on board was very interesting. We were doing something called telemedicine, where we were using the ultrasound, and I'm not an MD, and neither was my crewmate on board, but we were able to, with very little training, show that we could produce diagnostic quality images of bones, eyes, internal organs, things like that. And so one interesting application of this ultrasound is the possibility that you could actually use it to measure critical bone areas, or areas where we know historically have seen a lot of loss, and you could actually track during a long space mission, do measurements and track if you're losing bone in these areas. So that's something that's very exciting, because on Earth, when they check you for bone loss, you get in this big machine. I mean, it's huge. It's the size of a room, and it's got a platform with an X-ray that kind of scans your whole body and in critical areas, and it takes a while, and it just wouldn't be practical to have a machine like that in space. So if you could show that using a portable diagnostic quality ultrasound, which basically is the size of a laptop with some extensions to it, if you could actually measure reliably bone loss with that, that would be a great tool to have. Well, there's some very exciting work in that area, and one of the researchers that's funded by NSBRI is working on exactly that. And that has real application because when you're monitoring an astronaut, and we're not always monitored, but during certain times when we're having a physical exam, we have to take blood samples or we have to give other samples, and it's not easy to do, especially in zero gravity. So if you can imagine trying to squeeze blood out of a finger prick and then getting into a capillary tube and getting that into a machine to be analyzed, it all can be done, and we do it. But it's, then you might have some droplets of blood floating around, So if you can find a non-invasive way to do it, that would certainly make life easier for us on board. Also, when you're in a spacesuit, we do some very rudimentary monitoring right now in both the Russian and the U.S. spacesuits. We load up a simple electrocardiogram, and the flight surgeons can look at the, your heartbeat while you're doing a spacewalk. They can also well, they don't have it right now, but they could also theoretically look at maybe with this device the oxygenation of your blood and other parameters just to determine the health of the astronaut who's doing the spacewalk. So this kind of technology is very exciting and has real application in space. And the neat thing about a lot of the NSBRI projects that are funded by NSBRI is they also have application for patients on the ground. The ultrasound that I mentioned has application not only in space for a long mission or for a mission to the moon or Mars, but also in remote areas on the Earth. Not even just, I'm not even talking about expeditions like to the Antarctic, but just a remote area, a small town somewhere. The local doctor is not going to know everything. And so if that person can link in with a diagnostic ultrasound to the hospital in New York City, through the internet, then they can do a very quick diagnosis of something that's wrong with someone who's in this remote area. Well, if you ask astronauts, we'll tell you there's no issue, But of course, fatigue is a problem. I mean, it's as big a problem in space as it is on the ground. And you could make an argument that it's even more critical in space because a mistake up there could be literally life-threatening or could cause, big problems in the mission. So fatigue is an issue that we're concerned about. We're definitely scheduled for a full 8 hours of sleep every night. But just like on Earth, you're often busy, and you usually don't use all that 8 hours to sleep. You're usually staying up late and catching up on things or doing something you want to do, looking at your photographs or watching a movie or something. And so over time, over a long mission, fatigue can really build up. And that's something that we are trained as astronauts to be self-aware of. We have to kind of monitor ourselves. But we also have tools, and some of which are also funded by NSBRI. We have self-assessment tools, computer-based tools to see if how we're performing mentally. And there's some also very interesting technology and work that's being funded by NSBRI to look at facial recognition, to look at your patterns to see if you're experiencing stress or fatigue. I find that interesting, and I have to tell you, as an astronaut, it makes me a little bit concerned because as an operator, I could see getting up there and thinking, well, okay, now I've got to control my facial muscles to make sure that they don't think I'm stressed out. But really, it's the kind of thing that I think we'll gain acceptance with gradually, but it probably has more immediate application in things like homeland security and, looking at facial recognition of people going through airports and things like that to see who's under stress.